Hello, Jacob from PC Gamer here, and I am joined by Alan and Katie. Say hello.
Hello, I'm Alan.
Solemn wave, because we're going to talk about the GPU crisis and why you can't buy a graphics card, and hopefully what could happen so that you can buy one at some point in the future. So I think kind of the main thing we want to talk about right from the get-go is how the current solution, the free market, as they say, isn't exactly working too well. In that you can't get any.
Down with capitalism. Is that really the message you're getting out of this?
That's what we're going for. No, it's one of those things, isn't it, where the graphics card has become such a major point of gaming performance that, everyone's piece of advice is, if you're going to spend a lot of money on one component of your PC, you really want to spend it on your graphics card, because that's where you're going to get the huge boost of performance, and it's where it's going to make it's going to be worthwhile. And then you've got the situation now where you can't actually buy a graphics card. You can buy a graphics card from 2 years ago, even if you wanted one from 2 years ago. And we've got these brand new graphics cards that come out, which are excellent, and you can't buy those either. So it's a horrible stalemate where the companies that are making them want to make more of them. The consumers want to buy more of them. Cryptocurrency miners want more of them because they can make money, because that's come back into fashion. And resellers are hoping to get more of them so that they can sell them on for money because the demand's there. So you've got this kind of trifecta of things that are all making for a rather uncomfortable situation if you're trying to build a PC in 2021.
It's very much a perfect storm, isn't it? The fact that this is a good generation. I think if this had happened, a year and a bit ago, when we got when we got Turing, it would have been very much kind of like, yeah, okay, you'll be all right. Just get on with it. It's fine. But Ampere's really good, and unfortunately for AMD, their cards are really good as well. So
yeah,
I say unfortunately, but they can't seem. They've said nothing on this, have they? That's the surprise so far. At least Nvidia said, look, we can't produce enough, etc. AMD, not a word, just nothing at all.
And we kind of went into this saying we were going to originally talk about, what could be done to prevent resellers from selling cards. But then we kind of expanded it out because realistically that seems like a symptom of a wider problem. And the wider problem is just simply that they cannot make enough of these for the demand. The demand's coming from all sorts of different places, but the core problem is there's just not enough being made. And so I think there's been some interesting solutions so far to try and combat that. So obviously you've had manufacturer queues is one of them. EVGA is probably the prime example of that. And that seems to have worked fairly well. It's just slow going.
Yeah, you've got some companies coming back and saying like, oh, is it all right if we up the price as well? Which, you don't want that. You've just put some money down and somebody comes back and says, can I have a bit more, please? It's like, no.
Yeah, that's a bit harsh. And we've heard of that firsthand, where one of our reviewers he ended up spending more. He did get a much better graphics card, to be fair, than the one he originally wanted, but it cost him a lot more money than he originally wanted. I think he got a screen on it as well, so there are bonuses all then. So.
Yeah, you get the bonus there. Yeah, and so pre-orders was obviously the initial system. They launched a bunch of cards and they said, all right, okay, you can pre-order as many cards as you want, and that obviously backfired for a lot of retailers, and they suddenly turned around and said, actually, you know what, stop all pre-orders. We're not going to take any pre-orders from now on. And I think now if you go into a store, if you get it at the right time, they might have stock of a card. It might come in for a second or a picosecond. And you have that chance to just buy that card and get it shipped to you. Because
I haven't seen any.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rare occurrence, but they just won't. So that's kind of, I guess, the old-fashioned approach to how they fix this solution.
Well, in a way, pre-orders are doing a different thing anyway, aren't they? But the idea of a pre-order is that it allows you to manage inventory, to make sure that you've got stock. It puts the power on the reseller. Thing is, they don't need that. They don't need pre-orders because they're going to sell everything they get in, and they don't want someone to pre-order and then not buy it. So pre-orders have kind of served their purpose. It's not going to work when there's this much demand. So I can see why. Companies are just not accepting it. Although someone like EVGA, it kind of makes sense a little bit because as a customer journey, it's much better for building that brand. I wish more people did it really, but that's where we
are. Because all the solutions we've kind of seen from this now that are trying to react to the situation have all been about chance to an extent, or like luck. They've really been luck-based solutions. Like retail lotteries has been like a luck-based thing. Just trying to get like, there's auctions where like if you have the right amount of money, like yeah, okay, you can now have it as well. Like it's just unfortunate all the way around that you can't just go out, you can't just pick one up. And obviously now we've seen Nvidia kind of say, all right, well we'll have a more permanent solution. That's our cryptocurrency mining limit. That'll stop a big chunk of people that want them, and not everyone. Let's not put the blame on wholly on any group here, because there are tons of people that just want these as well. They're going to sell it no matter what. But they were like, okay, we can cut out a chunk that's not intended to have these cards from having these cards. And they're quite confident about it.
Mining limiters didn't go very well, did it?
No. How
it
long
didn't go well.
How long was it around? A week?
Yeah, I don't know the exact time.
Weeks?
But yeah, the dev drivers came out with an old version, effectively, and straight from Nvidia's menu, and said, we accidentally kind of lifted the limit we put on. And I think once, as we put at the time, you can't put the genie back in the bottle there, because once it's out, it's out there, and you can't really retract that or take it back. So I think that was not that.
Oh, sorry. Is it not that only worked for certain instances though?
Yeah.
So you had to, if you had like a rig of GPUs, that it wouldn't work.
Yeah, I think it was certain boards and there were certain combinations of things, and just because it's different partners and stuff like that, meant that I think you did have to be specific. But once you've figured out, I think there's a lot of use of like dummy HDMI's and stuff like that, which kind of made it so that you could trick it again. And
of course.
It felt very much like, the cat's out of the bag. We've kind of accidentally let this one go now. But it was an interesting concept to a problem that they're trying to not replicate what happened like 2017, 2018, where you just couldn't buy a graphics card for about a year. And they were saying instead, let's try and like create something where you can, we'll try and ease the demand a little bit. There's still going to be a lot of demand. I mean, that's the 3060. That's probably going to have the highest demand of any of the cards that have come out recently. And it's an interesting concept, but it was mixed with it. It hit mixed responses from the audience, because some people say, oh, you shouldn't be limiting what this graphics card can do because I bought it, and other people saying, put a limit on there, block every cryptocurrency. You're just doing Ethereum, you should get rid of all of them, and do it on all your other cards as well. So that's an interesting concept of how you potentially get around it.
I think Nvidia, I wouldn't applaud them for it, but I think it's at least they're trying to do something, and I think that makes sense. You're trying to produce a card. 3060 is a really good example of what card to do that on, because that's kind of a mainstream consumer card, and it probably does mine quite well as well. Which, I mean, the reason AMD hasn't done something similar is because their RDNA 2 cards don't mine very well. So even if they put a block on it, it's not going to make much difference.
I think
still
we said that
as well. But
I think we said that at the time. That they're still quite good for mining anyway. Like, even no matter what card, they're still pretty decent at mining. And so they're going to sell out anyway. Like, the demand is so high, 'cause I think that's easily overlooked. There's so much money to be made in crypto at this point because it's on riding high, that people will pay anything, and they're willing to pay above and beyond what your average gamer would pay for that same card, based on the performance versus past cards or the card they might already have. So I think it's an interesting decision by them, but then they've also kind of gone in the other direction and said, all right, we'll do custom mining graphics SKUs now as well. I think that's another solution then to move into, which we have seen in the past with the past 2017, 2018 one. And now we've seen that come back.
That's a weird one though, because there's no resale value for those cards. If you were a miner, I mean, you're not, Jacob, but if you were, with all those cards you've been reviewing lately, you would prefer a card that you can sell on afterwards. You wouldn't want one that is only for mining. And I definitely wouldn't be interested in a second-hand mined to the hilt card. It's just a horrible idea. So it's a tricky one, but we will see how this plays out. I mean, no one knows how much an impact the miners are actually having. I think that's the thing. There is enough demand regardless. Even if there wasn't a mining thing going on right now, I think there'd still be problems. I think people would still be selling most of the cards that they can make.
Because this chip problem is further than just GPUs. This isn't just a problem with just graphics cards manufacturers not being able to get enough silicon from TSMC or Samsung. It's everyone is struggling to get components for basically everything. Car manufacturers especially is the one I think is the main one that people are concerned about, just for the amount of money involved. But they can't get the chips that they need. So from that, that's a lot of things that people have tried that have failed. But if we're trying to say, like, what are the actual solutions to this, even if they're not about now, what would you say is, if you don't have a graphics card right now and you're trying to look at some way you could, whether it's been broken or you just want to play some games, like, what is your best bet right now?
You've got streaming platforms, game streaming, so things like GeForce Now and Stadia, Steam does it as well, I think. So
I think you need a machine that can render still to stream Steam, but definitely Stadia and GeForce Now. I've not tried Stadia, I have to say. I'm not interested in the slightest. But
out of the
GeForce
two,
Now,
I've tried both quite a bit. GeForce Now is definitely the one that's taken me, but I think that's probably because as a PC gamer primarily, I've got so many games on Steam anyway, and GeForce Now ties into your Steam account. So if you've been playing on a low powered machine and you're like, oh, I want a bit of an upgrade, I want to play this thing, and I can't even play this modern game that's come out. Potentially GeForce Now is a way of doing it while retaining access to a lot of what you already had. So I think it's an interesting space for streaming, because maybe it's accelerated the adoption somewhat, because everyone's always been saying streaming is going to be this future all the time, and I'm skeptical, but I think people like a local machine. But if you can't have a local machine, that's your next best thing, surely.
Rent one.
Yeah, rent one essentially is how it works, isn't it? Yeah, and you're right. The reason I haven't really spent any time with Stadia, I think I had something when it first launched, but it's because I have no games. I'm not going to spend money on a service like that. Whereas having access to the games I already own, if my graphics card broke, and I didn't have another one in a box there, but if my graphics card broke, I would use GeForce Now absolutely to play the games I want to play, and that's like, there's nothing quite like that right now, so I'd be quite happy. Alternatively, I'd use an integrated graphics solution.
So I was just about to say, you've just put an article up with a guide of how to build. If you really wanted a machine and you didn't have a graphics card, you couldn't get access to one, you didn't want to pay, over the odds for one either, but you wanted a local machine, what would you recommend in that situation?
Well, I quite like my, it's here, I'm looking to it, you can't see it. I quite like my $400 PC. It's not great, don't get me wrong, it struggles at 1080, but 720 you can play a lot of games, and it streams, which is the other thing as well, so I could do the GeForce Now thing. So yeah, I'm actually really interested to see what just launched today is the new Rocket Lake chips, what the integrated graphics on those are actually like on desktop. They could be alright if all you're trying to do is get by at the moment until you can upgrade. Assuming this ends at some point and we do actually get graphics cards, then having a machine that you can use and then add a graphics card to later makes sense. I think that's
the beauty of those, the AMD Ryzen chips, the APUs you're chatting about. They have you slot into a motherboard that still has the PCI slot, and just like the Intel one, you could update this down the line and just slot a graphics card in once you can get a graphics card. So that option is available to you, and I think that's probably what we should really talk about next, like the macro level. Like, when will we actually get this influx of graphics cards that people are so often talking about, but it keeps getting pushed back, it feels, all the way later into the year. So we initially had, it won't clear up for Q1 from NVIDIA, or until Q1 from NVIDIA last year, and then that's been pushed back. I think Colette Crest slowly pushed back, and now we're kind of like May, June, and now it's kind of Q3.
It's been about 5 times that, yeah.
Yeah.
I think maybe everyone's kind of reacting to NVIDIA is working with Samsung, you've got AMD working with TSMC. I mean, they're reacting to what those companies are telling them as well. They're not even getting it directly firsthand. It's kind of always going through these chains of where you're getting components from. So when do you kind of, if you had to take a guess, and this is a fraught question that I'm throwing out to you two there, if you had to take a guess, when would you say that, you could walk in, maybe not walk into the shop, but you could go online and you could see a graphics card that's just been in stock and it's steadily in stock?
Exit stage left. Yeah, you said something earlier that made me. I thought you might be slightly optimistic with it. Is you said, when do you think there's going to be this influx? And I don't think there is. I think demand
it's going to be a trickle.
It's going to be a trickle. It's going to be a trickle for a long, long time. I think Nvidia said early on that it was going to be end of Q1 maybe, and then I think Jacob, you spotted it. Their Q1 is different to everyone else's Q1, which threw things a little bit. But even looking now, we had the report last week from Asus saying that, look, as normal Q1 you don't sell as many as you did from the previous Q4. So Nvidia ordered less from Samsung, which is like, yeah, okay, that's what the market does. But we're not in normal times, so we haven't hit the demand. We haven't solved that problem, and things are going to start ramping up now again. And if we start going back to work, is there going to be more demand as people upgrade their machines? I mean, it's just like, I just hate to say it, I think it's going to get worse. I think we're going to be like this until late summer, and then maybe we'll start getting something. The thing is, these things are ordered so far in advance, and demand, and it's not just graphics cards, it's everything. So the capacity of TSMC of Samsung is used up, and that's not going to change anytime soon. It's just there's going to be more there.
I think that's a good point. It's not as simple as just ordering more, and it turns up, these are multi-billion-dollar fabs that are running at capacity most of the time, where they've been ordered with these real watertight contracts going way back with hundreds of high-profile companies. But I think that leads on to something quite interesting. And you didn't answer my question. I want to the date when you think it was to be back, but we'll move on past that. But
August
I think
the 3rd. Right.
I think that's quite early. But an interesting thing about that is, Apple are moving off TSMC's 7 nanometer. They're kind of shifting over to 5 nanometer, and they're always pushing that, going for the next, latest and greatest thing. And that will free up some capacity. I mean, we're all chatting from rumors here because, TSMC are a very kind of secretive company with what goes on their orders, as you can imagine, any company like that would be. But, the rumor is Apple is kind of shifting off and AMD's kind of adopting, they're taking up a lot more of that space that's being left over. So do you think that for maybe AMD, they'll start improving their supply?
Do you want to take that, Katie? No.
Not massively.
I mean, we don't know, do we? That's the thing. So Nvidia's supposed to be tapping up TSMC at the same time as well. Intel has announced that they're going to be entering the contract fabrication business. Is that a word? But that's years down the line. So the problem right now is what capacity is out there that we know of has gone.
It's a right now problem, and that's going to stretch for probably the year if you think about it, because like you're saying, they're ordering so far in advance that the capacity that is available right now is what's building the stuff that you're going to get right towards the end of the year, and there's really no way of changing that, however bleak that might seem. But but I think with the AMD thing, maybe that they've got an interesting balance, unlike Nvidia, who they want to make graphics cards, they just want to make graphics cards. That gaming is a huge segment for them, and regardless of what anyone might say on here or there, like they want to sell as many of these graphics cards as they can, and gaming is a huge segment, so they're going to try and build as many. AMD are also going to try and build as many graphics cards as they can, but they're also contained with themselves, and that they've got this huge and tremendously successful CPU business alongside. And AMD's graphics business is definitely improved. RDNA is like a huge step, but compared to Ryzen, I mean, Ryzen and EPYC are really making a huge dent on Intel's market share, and that momentum is going to be something that obviously they're going to want to keep going. So if they get more of TSMC's capacity, which, like you say, might not even really make a huge difference this year, might be more next year, how much of that are they thinking, well, that's going to go into making these chips? And then of course you've got consoles as well, which that's probably a very difficult and complex relationship between Microsoft, Sony, and AMD, which are also facing shortages. So yeah, it's tough to guess to when it's going to be better or actually have like a firm answer. But
I think one thing with Nvidia, in their defense of this, they may not produce CPUs, but they've got different prongs in their industries. I mean, they've got the automotive, they've got server side, kind of the whole AI stuff. I mean, they're big as well, so I don't know. The yields on those are probably terrifyingly small, but they make so much money that it all works out financially. but they're competing with their graphics arm as well. And it's just like, and how does it work with like 3090s versus 3060s? How much space? It's quite the juggling act. I mean,
yeah, I think you've kind of seen that juggling act even in the gaming space with, say, maybe like the 3060 Ti is like a smaller version of the same GPU that's going in the higher, and you always see that segmentation where they're using the different yields of however many of this chip is hitting this many cores that they can use at this frequency, and they'll keep making smaller and smaller GPU graphics cards with the same chip to kind of get those higher yields up. And I think you're kind of seeing that same thing. Are they trying to get out as many as they can right now instead of just, as they traditionally might, leave a first wave of cards out there and go, okay, all right, now we'll bring a TI in and we'll do it. Now they're just like, hey, we've got these GPUs. They're not going to sit around. Let's put them into a card. Let's get them out there. I think, obviously, all of this has kind of led us to a bleak conclusion of we don't know if we do have any answers. But, I'm trying to think of some way of having some positivity going towards the end of the year. Looking back at 2017, 2018, and it did last a very long time. But when it did come back and stock came back, it did come back quick. And it did feel like the prices kind of aligned in a way that was a bit more favorable. And like you said, the secondhand market comes about as well, because cryptocurrency miners, if it drops, the value drops. And this is all, based on the fact that it does have to kind of drop in, or the profitability or the difficulty has to go up. A range of different things has to happen in order for cryptocurrency miners anyway to just suddenly go flood the market with this stuff. We don't want it anymore. We don't want to lose money on it. We don't want to hold on to it. It makes us more money to sell it. So, is that a potential way out in the interim, even before supply comes back, if there is a burst of the crypto bubble? Not much positivity I'm seeing.
Yeah, no, that could happen. And it wouldn't take much for the crypto market to suddenly recheck itself and everything stabilize again, and maybe graphics cards would come back. And I mean, they've not had them for long, so there's probably would be some good bargains out there. But if you look on eBay, other resellers are available, but if you look on eBay, it's not a pretty sight because the demand is so high right now. It's quite hard to predict where it's going to go. I mean, you can't get anything. This we're in that whole, and it's like 4 years ago, where it's not that you just can't get the new good cards that are really good. You can't get anything. There are no graphics cards. I think there's 1050 Ti's for like $400 and things. I'm like, no, I'm good, thanks.
I mean, they came back obviously as like a technically never discontinued, so it wasn't like they brought it back from the dead, but realistically discontinued. Let's just say the fact they're discontinued, but they come back and they're the same price that they were really when they came out for this card. That's
nuts.
A 10 series card that was it's the not a bad performer at 1080p by any means, but just been superseded by so many better cards by this point. Like, it's just old in terms of the performance that it can offer. Bang for your buck, I suppose. And even that is gone. So where do we go? I'm trying to have some positivity. I'm trying to end on a positive note. What is there? What hope is there?
I think one way of looking at this is you can sort out your machine. Robin, who makes PC Gamer magazine, he needs to upgrade his machine. He can't go graphics card right now. I think he might have even ordered a new machine, and he's just waiting for it to arrive. So, but his way of looking at it is he's playing simpler games, older games, waiting to hit Assassin's Creed Valhalla when he gets his new machine. So you just put off. And to be honest, it's something like Cyberpunk 2077. Waiting's possibly not a bad idea. Yeah. So maybe that's the way you do it, is you just play some games that aren't graphically demanding, that work.
Go back and play some point and click games in your browser. Still PC gaming, it counts.
It does. No, it doesn't.
And I suppose there's that thing of, can you get a little bit more juice out of your current machine? Can you squeeze a little bit more out of it? If you're really running it to the ragged edge, can you just overclock it to hell and back and just say, all right, this is its last run. Charged as it goes out, a bit suicidal. Maybe it won't work too well, but we'll give it a bash and just crank the voltage up and see what happens.
Yeah, I think that works. And we've got a feature on the hardware side of things at the moment about getting more from your machine, and airflow is the biggie, because these CPUs and GPUs are so temperature sensitive now that if you can improve the airflow in your machine, you will get more out of it anyway. So that's the thing. Spend a bit of time, give it a bit of TLC. You can't get a GPU, so make the most of what you've got, and that's a good way of doing it. You'll get a few more frames out of it, or just smoother. To be honest, a lot of the times with older graphics cards, it's the lows that are the problem. Your average might be fine, but you'll really dip down. So making sure machine's running as well as it can it makes sense.
And if that's not an option, then potentially streaming, I guess. Then
streaming's
that's kind of what we're.
I think I've streamed a little bit in this last 12 months, whatever, and it's better than I thought. I always assumed you needed a really good internet connection, and you do a bit, but it's actually been very smooth. I thought you could feel the lag. You can't necessarily. Depends on the game. I'm not suggesting you play a competitive first-person shooter streaming. There are probably people that do it. But
try and play Valorant streaming. I don't think it's too much fun. But
it's an option. I think it's an option.
And remember, we are learning things like patience.
Yeah, we're learning a moral lesson as well, and we're becoming better people for it, apparently. So
I'm really not.
Okay, well, I think on that, that message of hope, I guess we'll end it there. But thanks for joining me, you two.
Cool.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care.